The shuttle bay of the Galactic Coalition Academy was filled with nervous cadets. 47 young beings from 12 different species stood in neat rows, listening to the final briefing before their survival examination. Most of them were shaking. Some were quietly crying. A few looked like they might pass out at any moment. Instructor Volthos, a tall insectoid Crithian with 4 arms and compound eyes, walked back and forth in front of them. His voice was calm but serious. "You will be dropped onto Vexorus 7, he said. It is classified as a Class 3 Deathworld. The planet has extreme weather, dangerous predators, and toxic plant life. Your objective is simple. Survive for 7 standard days until extraction." A small, fur-covered Valani cadet named Zira raised one of her 4 hands. "Instructor, what is the survival rate for this examination?" Velthos paused. Historically, 62% of cadets complete the exercise successfully. The rest are extracted early due to injury, panic, or other complications. The room grew even more tense. Zira lowered her hand and wrapped her arms around herself. In the back row, a human cadet named Jake Collins raised his hand. He was 22 years old, with short brown hair and a relaxed expression that seemed completely out of place among the terrified aliens. "Sir, are we allowed to bring fishing gear?" Jake asked. Velthos turned his large head toward the human. His compound eyes reflected confusion. "Fishing gear?" "Yeah, for catching fish. If there are rivers or lakes down there, it would make food gathering a lot easier." Several alien cadets stared at Jake like he had lost his mind. A massive gray-skinned Gorvan named Torvik let out a grunt of disbelief. The Gorvan were a proud warrior species, and Torvik had made it clear during training that he considered humans to be soft and weak. "Cadet Collins," Velthos said slowly, "you will be dropped onto a planet where the average predator weighs over 300 kilograms and the storms can strip flesh from bone. Your concern is fishing equipment?" Jake shrugged. "I just like fresh fish, sir, but I can make do without it." Velthos stared at him for a long moment, then turned back to address the full group. "You will depart in 1 hour. May fortune favor you all." The cadets were divided into groups of 7 and assigned to different drop zones. Jake found himself grouped with Zira, Torvik, and 4 other alien cadets. Their drop zone was called the Crimson Barrens, a region known for its red-colored vegetation and high predator density. As they boarded their drop pod, Torvik pushed past Jake roughly. "Stay out of my way, human. I do not intend to fail this examination because of your species' weakness." Jake just smiled. "Sure thing, big guy. Good luck out there." The drop was rough. The pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere, and warning lights flashed across the interior. Zira was gripping her seat so hard that her claws had torn through the material. The other cadets were not doing much better. Jake looked out the small window and watched the clouds rush past. "Nice view," he said to no one in particular. They landed hard in a clearing surrounded by twisted red trees. The pod doors opened, and hot, dry air rushed inside. The twin suns of Vexorus 7 hung in the orange sky, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. Jake was the first one out. He took a deep breath and looked around, nodding slowly. "Not bad. Reminds me of Arizona, but with weirder plants." The others stumbled out behind him, looking around with wide, fearful eyes. The sounds of the wilderness surrounded them. Distant howls echoed from the hills. Strange clicking noises came from the trees. Something large moved through the undergrowth nearby. "We need to establish a defensive position," Torvik announced, pulling out a standard-issue scanner. "My equipment will locate the safest area." Jake was already walking toward a rocky outcrop about 50 meters away. "That spot over there looks good. High ground, natural walls on 3 sides, and we can see anything coming from a distance." Torvik's scanner beeped. He looked at the screen, then looked at the outcrop Jake had pointed to. The scanner had identified the same location as optimal. The Gorvan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. They made camp as the first sun began to set. Jake gathered dry vegetation and arranged stones in a circle while the alien cadets watched with confusion. "What are you doing?" Zira asked. "Building a fire pit," Jake said. He pulled out a small emergency kit and used the sparking tool inside to ignite the dry material. Within minutes, a small fire was crackling in the center of their camp. The alien cadets gathered around it, drawn by the warmth and light. As the second sun disappeared below the horizon, the temperature dropped rapidly. The fire became their only source of comfort against the cold darkness. Then the storm came. It arrived without warning. One moment the sky was clear and full of unfamiliar stars. The next moment, massive clouds rolled in and lightning began to strike the ground all around them. The wind howled like a living thing, and the rain came down in sheets so thick that visibility dropped to almost nothing. The alien cadets panicked. Some tried to run. Others curled up on the ground and covered their heads. Zira was crying openly, her fur soaked and her small body shaking. Jake stood calmly in the middle of the chaos. He had already positioned himself under a natural rock overhang, and he was using the emergency tarp from his kit to create additional shelter. "Everyone get over here," he called out. "Stay low and stay close." One by one, the cadets crawled toward him. Even Torvik, his pride forgotten in the face of the storm, squeezed under the shelter with the others. They huddled together in the darkness while lightning turned the night into brief flashes of blinding white. "How are you so calm?" Zira shouted over the wind. Jake was checking the edges of the tarp to make sure it was secure. This is nothing. You should see a thunderstorm in Wyoming. Now that is impressive weather." The storm lasted for 3 hours. When it finally passed, the 7 cadets emerged from their shelter, exhausted and soaked but alive. The landscape around them was changed. Trees had been knocked down. The ground was covered in mud and debris. Jake stretched his arms above his head and yawned. "All right, everyone try to get some sleep. I will take first watch. You are not tired?" Torvik asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "A little," Jake admitted. "But someone needs to keep an eye out for predators. They will be active after the storm, looking for easy prey." He smiled at the Gorvan. "Do not worry. I have done this before." He found a comfortable spot at the edge of their camp where he could see the surrounding area. As the alien cadets settled down to rest, Jake began to hum a quiet tune to himself. Above them, hidden cameras transmitted everything back to the orbital station where Instructor Velthos was watching. The Crithian leaned closer to his screen, his compound eyes fixed on the human cadet who had just survived a Class 3 planetary storm like it was nothing special. What kind of world do these humans come from? He whispered to himself. No one had an answer. The first light of the twin suns woke the cadets from their restless sleep. Jake was still sitting in the same spot, watching the horizon. He did not look tired at all. Zira was the first to approach him. Her fur was still damp from the storm, and she looked exhausted. "Did you stay awake all night?" "Most of it," Jake said. "I napped a little when things got quiet." "Do not worry, I am used to it." Torvik stood up and stretched his massive arms. The Gorvan's gray skin was covered in scratches from the rough shelter, but he seemed unharmed. "We need to find food and water," he announced. "My scanner indicates a water source 3 kilometers to the east." Jake was already looking in a different direction. He was studying the plants nearby, examining their leaves and stems. "There is water closer than that. See those plants with the thick stems? They only grow near moisture. Follow them, and we find water." "I trust my equipment," Torvik said firmly. "Your equipment got wet in the storm," Jake pointed out. The readings might be off, but go ahead and try if you want. Torvik looked at his scanner. The screen flickered briefly, then displayed an error message. The Gorvan's jaw tightened with frustration. Without a word, he put the device away and gestured for Jake to lead the way. The group followed the trail of thick-stemmed plants through the red wilderness. Jake moved with confidence, stepping over obstacles and ducking under low branches like he had walked this path 100 times before. The alien cadets struggled to keep up. "How do you know where you are going?" one of the other cadets asked. He was a thin, pale-skinned Marathi with large black eyes. "I am reading the signs," Jake said. "The plants tell you where water is. The animal tracks tell you where predators hunt. The way the ground slopes tells you which direction water flows." He pointed at a patch of disturbed earth. "Something big walked through here recently, probably during the storm. We should stay alert." They found the stream less than an hour later. It was a narrow channel of clear water flowing between mossy rocks. The alien cadets rushed toward it, desperate to drink. "Wait," Jake said sharply. Everyone stopped. Jake knelt by the water's edge and examined it carefully. He sniffed the air, studied the rocks, and looked at the plants growing along the banks. Then he dipped his finger in the water and touched it to his tongue. "What are you doing?" Zira asked, horrified. "That could be poisonous." "It is not," Jake said. "No dead animals nearby, healthy plants growing in it, no strange smell or color. The water is safe." He cupped his hands and took a long drink. "But if you want to be extra careful, we can boil it first." He showed them how to collect water in their emergency containers and purify it using heat from a small fire. The alien cadets watched every step like he was performing magic. After everyone had drunk their fill, Jake turned his attention to food. He walked along the stream, studying the plants and occasionally pulling one up to examine its roots. "This one is safe," he said, holding up a plant with small blue leaves. "The root tastes like nothing, but it has nutrients. This other one with the yellow spots is probably toxic. See how no insects have touched it? That is a bad sign. How do you know all this?" Torvik asked. There was no mockery in his voice now, only genuine curiosity. "My father taught me," Jake said. "We used to go camping every summer when I was young. Montana has a lot of wilderness. If you do not know how to survive in it, you do not last long." They gathered enough edible plants for a small meal. It was not satisfying, but it would keep them alive. Jake mentioned that he would try to catch some fish later if they stayed near the stream. That was when they heard the sound dot. It was a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The alien cadets froze. Jake slowly turned his head and looked toward a cluster of large rocks about 30 meters away. A creature was emerging from behind them. It was huge, at least the size of a small vehicle. 6 powerful legs carried its massive body, and its head was covered in blade-like appendages that looked sharp enough to cut through metal. 2 rows of eyes, glowing faintly in the shadow, were fixed directly on the group. "Shadow Maw," Torvik whispered. His hand moved toward his emergency weapon, a small energy blade that all cadets carried. "Do not move," Jake said quietly. "Do not run. Do not look away." "We should fight," Torvik said, his voice shaking slightly despite his words. "No, that thing is built for chasing and ambushing. If we run, it will catch us. If we fight, it will kill us. We need to make it think we are not worth the trouble." Jake took a slow step backward. His eyes never left the Shadow Maw. "Everyone, move with me. Slowly. Stay together. Make yourself look as big as possible." The alien cadets obeyed, their terror overriding any urge to argue. They moved as a group, step by careful step, backing away from the massive predator. Jake kept himself at the front, directly facing the creature. The Shadow Maw watched them. It took a few steps forward, testing their reaction. Jake stopped moving and stood taller, spreading his arms slightly. "Come on," he said in a calm, steady voice. "You do not want us. We are more trouble than we are worth." For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. The predator and the prey stared at each other across the red-tinted landscape. Then the Shadow Maw turned away. It moved back toward the rocks, its 6 legs carrying it silently into the shadows. Within seconds, it had disappeared completely. The alien cadets let out their breath. Zira collapsed to her knees, shaking. Even Torvik looked pale beneath his gray skin. "How did you know that would work?" The Marathi cadet asked. "Predators are smart," Jake explained. "They do not want to fight unless they have to. Injuries are dangerous in the wild. If prey looks confident and does not run, most predators will decide to find easier food elsewhere. Your species has faced creatures like that before." Jake smiled. "Earth is bears, wolves, big cats, and a lot of other things that would love to eat humans. Our ancestors learned how to deal with them, or they died. The ones who survived passed down what they knew. They made camp near the stream that night. Jake showed them how to build a better shelter using branches and large leaves. He caught 3 fish from the water using a sharpened stick and cooked them over the fire. The alien cadets ate in silence, still processing the events of the day. As darkness fell, a beeping sound came from the distance. It was faint but unmistakable. "Emergency beacon," Torvik said. "Another group is in trouble." Jake stood up and looked toward the source of the sound. His expression was serious. "How far?" "Several kilometers at least, in the direction of the deep forest." The other cadets exchanged nervous glances. No one wanted to leave the safety of their camp, especially not to walk into unknown danger. But Jake was already packing his supplies. "We should help them," he said simply. "That is not our responsibility," Torvik argued. "Our objective is to survive, not rescue others." Jake looked at the Gorvan with an expression that was hard to read. "Where I come from, you do not leave people behind. Not if you can help." He started walking toward the beacon. One by one, the others followed. The journey through the night was slow and dangerous. Jake led the group carefully, stopping often to listen and watch for threats. The twin moons of Exodus 7 provided just enough light to see the path ahead, but shadows hid countless dangers. "Why are we doing this?" one of the cadets whispered. She was a Pelori, a small bird-like creature with delicate feathers and large, frightened eyes. Her name was Mira. "We could die trying to save strangers. Would you want to be left alone out here?" Jake asked without turning around. "Hurt and surrounded by predators? Hoping someone would come?" Myra did not answer. She just followed, her small feet moving quickly to keep up with the others. They traveled for 2 hours before they found the source of the beacon. It was coming from a rocky outcrop at the edge of a dense forest. The terrain here was more difficult, with deep ravines and unstable ground that threatened to crumble with every step. Jake held up his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He crouched low and studied the scene ahead. 3 cadets were trapped on a narrow ledge about 20 meters from the ground. One of them, a Crithian named Senix, was lying still with an obviously broken leg. The other 2 were Pelori, including one named Sheev, who was calling out weakly for help. They had used their emergency beacon hours ago, and had been waiting ever since. Surrounding the base of the outcrop were 8 Shadow Maws. 8 of them, Torvik said quietly, his voice filled with dread. "We cannot fight 8 of them." Jake was counting the predators carefully. He noticed their positions, their behavior, the way they watched the trapped cadets. "They are waiting," he said. "They know their prey is stuck. They will wait until hunger or thirst forces them to come down." "Then what do we do?" Zira asked. We cannot just leave them." Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he nodded slowly, as if he had made a decision. "We create a distraction. Draw the predators away long enough for you to get the others down." Torvik stared at him. "You want to draw 8 shadow maws toward yourself. That is suicide. Not if I am fast enough." Jake checked his equipment. He had a small light, some rope, and his emergency blade. Not much, but it would have to be enough. Predators like movement and noise. I will give them plenty of both. The plan was simple. Jake would circle around to the far side of the outcrop and make enough commotion to pull the shadow maws away from the trapped cadets. While they were focused on him, Torvik and Zira would climb up to the ledge, help the injured down, and get everyone to safety. "This is crazy," Torvik said. But he did not argue further. He had seen what Jake could do. Jake moved silently through the darkness, using every bit of cover available. He had learned this skill as a child, hunting deer with his father in the Montana wilderness. Move slow, stay low. Let the shadows hide you. When he reached his position, he took a deep breath. Then he turned on his light and started shouting, "Hey! Over here! Come get me, you ugly things!" The shadow maws reacted instantly. Their heads snapped toward the light and noise, their multiple eyes glowing with predatory interest. One of them let out that low, rumbling growl. Then they began to move, all 8 of them converging on Jake's position. Jake ran. He had never run so fast in his life. The ground was uneven and covered with debris, but he did not slow down. He could hear the shadow maws behind him, their heavy bodies crashing through the vegetation. They were faster than he had expected. He reached a narrow gap between 2 large rocks and squeezed through it. The shadow maws tried to follow, but their bodies were too big. They snarled and clawed at the rocks, trying to reach him. Jake kept moving, leading them further and further from the outcrop. He jumped over a small ravine, climbed up a steep slope, and ducked under a fallen tree. Every obstacle slowed the predators down a little more. Back at the outcrop, Torvik and Zira were climbing as fast as they could. The Gorvan's powerful arms pulled him up the rocky surface easily, and he reached down to help Zira follow. They found the 3 trapped cadets huddled together, terrified but alive. "We are here to help," Zira said. "Can you move?" Cheeve nodded quickly. His companion Myra, the second Pelori, was shaking but able to stand. Sanx, however, could not walk. His leg was bent at a terrible angle. "I will carry him," Torvik said. He lifted the injured Krithian onto his back with surprising gentleness. "We need to move now, before the predators return." They climbed down as quickly as possible and began running toward the meeting point Jake had designated before he left. Jake, meanwhile, was in trouble. 3 of the shadow maws had found a way around his obstacles. They were closing in on him from different directions, cutting off his escape routes. He backed up against a large boulder, his emergency blade in his hand. The predators stopped a few meters away, watching him. They were intelligent creatures. They knew he was trapped. Jake looked at them calmly. His heart was pounding, and every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run. But he had learned long ago that fear was not his enemy. Fear kept you alert. Fear kept you alive. The real enemy was panic. He stood taller. He spread his arms wide and took a step forward. "Come on then," he said in a loud, steady voice. "Let us see what you have got." The shadow maws hesitated. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. Prey ran. Prey cowered. It did not challenge them. Jake took another step forward. He picked up a rock and threw it at the nearest predator. It bounced off the creature's armored hide, doing no damage, but the message was clear. This prey was not afraid. One of the shadow maws turned away. Then another. The third lingered for a moment longer, its glowing eyes fixed on Jake. Then it too retreated into the darkness. Jake let out a long breath. His hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. He allowed himself a moment of weakness, then composed himself and began making his way to the meeting point. He found the others waiting for him in a small clearing. 8 cadets now, all alive. Zira ran to him as soon as she saw him. "You are okay," she said, relief flooding her voice. We heard the creatures chasing you, and—" "I am fine," Jake said, smiling tiredly. "Those things are not as tough as they look. They just need to know you are not an easy meal." Torvik approached him. The big Gorvan's expression was different now. There was respect in his eyes, and something else. Admiration, perhaps. "What you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid," he said. "Probably both," Jake admitted. They made camp in the clearing, tending to Senex's leg as best they could. Jake used straight sticks and strips of fabric to create a splint, immobilizing the broken bone so it would not get worse. The Crithian was in obvious pain, but managed to thank him. As the group settled in for the night, Chief approached Jake. The small Pelori's feathers were ruffled with emotion. "You risked your life for us," he said. "You did not even know us." Jake shrugged. "Where I come from, that does not matter. If someone needs help, and you can get it, you do. Is that a human custom? It is just common sense." Up in orbit, Instructor Velthos was watching the recording of Jake's confrontation with the Shadowmoors. Another instructor, a Villani named Cora, stood beside him. "He should have died," Cora said, her voice full of disbelief. "No cadet has ever faced 3 Class 3 predators alone and survived." "He did not just survive," Velthos replied slowly. "He made them retreat." He looked death in the eyes and refused to blink. "What kind of species produces beings like this?" Velthos did not answer. He just kept watching the screen where Jake Collins was now sitting by a small fire, telling stories to keep the frightened cadets calm. The human was smiling. The 4th day began with an uneasy feeling. Jake woke before the others and spent a long time staring at the sky. The twin suns were rising normally, but something felt wrong. The air was too still. The usual sounds of wildlife were absent. "What are you looking at?" Zira asked, coming to stand beside him. "The weather is going to change," Jake said. "Something big is coming." Torvik overheard them and checked his scanner. The device was working again after drying out overnight. "My equipment shows clear conditions for the next 48 hours. Jake shook his head. "Your equipment is wrong. Look at the animals." He pointed toward the distant tree line. Creatures were moving quickly, all heading in the same direction. When everything runs the same way, it means something dangerous is coming from the other direction. Torvik wanted to argue, but he had learned to trust Jake's instincts. "What do you suggest?" "We need shelter. Real shelter, not a tarp and some branches. There are hills to the north. I saw caves in the rock formations when we were rescuing the others. If we move fast, we can reach them before the storm hits." They broke camp immediately. Jake and Torvik took turns carrying Senex, whose leg was still too injured to walk on. The Crithian did his best not to slow them down, but progress was difficult over the rough terrain. 3 hours into their journey, the first signs of the storm appeared. Dark clouds began rolling in from the south, moving faster than any normal weather system. The wind picked up, carrying a strange metallic smell. "That is a Class 4 superstorm," one of the other cadets said, her voice filled with terror. She was a Marathi named Nyla, who had been quiet since the rescue. "I studied them in academy training. Winds over 200 kilometers per hour. Acidic rain that can burn through most materials. We cannot survive in the open." "Then, we will not be in the open," Jake said calmly. "Keep moving. The caves are close." They reached the hills just as the sky turned completely black. Lightning was striking constantly now, turning the darkness into a flickering nightmare of light and shadow. The wind was howling so loud that they had to shout to hear each other. Jake found the cave entrance he had spotted earlier. It was narrow but opened into a larger chamber beyond. Everyone inside now. They squeezed through the entrance one by one. Jake went last, making sure everyone was safe before pulling himself into the cave. Just as he did, the full force of the superstorm hit. The sound was indescribable. It was like standing inside a giant machine that was tearing itself apart. The cave shook with each massive lightning strike. The acidic rain pounded against the rocks outside, sending wisps of toxic vapor into the entrance. Jake blocked the entrance with rocks and emergency tarps, creating a seal that kept most of the vapor out. The cadets huddled deeper inside the cave, as far from the entrance as possible. How long will this last? Chief asked, his feathers pressed flat against his body in fear. I do not know, Jake admitted. Hours, probably. Maybe longer. We have water and some food. We just need to wait it out. The cave was dark, except for the small lights from their emergency kits. Strange bioluminescent fungi grew on the walls deeper inside, casting a faint blue glow. An underground stream flowed through the back of the chamber, providing fresh water, but they were not alone in the cave. Jake noticed it first. Sounds coming from deeper in the tunnel system. Clicking, scraping sounds that echoed off the stone walls. He picked up his light and moved toward the source of the noise. Where are you going? Zero whispered. We need to know what else lives in here, Jake said. Stay with the others. Keep them calm. He moved quietly through the narrow passage, following the sounds. The bioluminescent fungi grew thicker here, lighting his way with their soft blue glow. The clicking grew louder. He found them around a corner. 3 creatures, each about the size of a large dog. They had no eyes, but their heads were covered in heat-sensing organs. Their bodies were covered in thick armor plates, and their mouths were filled with crushing teeth, designed to break through stone. Burrowers, cave-dwelling predators that hunted by sensing body heat. Jake slowly backed away. The creatures had not noticed him yet. The cool cave walls in the distance from his body were masking his heat signature. But if he got any closer, they would sense him immediately. He returned to the group and explained the situation in a low voice. The cadets looked even more frightened than before. We are trapped between a storm that will kill us and predators that will eat us, Nyla said, her voice cracking. This is it. This is how we die. No one is dying, Jake said firmly. The burrowers sense heat. There is a cold stream at the back of the cave. If we stay near the water and keep our body temperatures low, they will not be able to find us. It was not a comfortable solution. The stream was freezing cold, and sitting near it for hours would be miserable. But it was better than being eaten. They arranged themselves along the stream's edge, half submerged in the cold water. Jake positioned himself between the group and the tunnel where the burrowers lived, ready to act if the creatures came closer. The storm raged outside. Inside, the cadets shivered in the darkness, listening to the clicking sounds of the predators and the howling of the wind. Time seemed to stretch into infinity. To keep morale up, Jake began to talk. He told them stories about Earth, about human history, about the challenges his species had overcome. He spoke of ice ages and droughts, of predators and plagues, of wars and disasters. And through it all, humans had survived. Why? Zira asked, her teeth chattering from the cold. How did your species survive so much? Jake thought about the question. Because we had to, he said finally. We were not the strongest or the fastest. We could not fly or breathe underwater or see in the dark. But we could think, and we could work together, and we never gave up. That is what humans do. We keep going, no matter what. Torvik, who was sitting nearby with his arms wrapped around himself, let out a quiet laugh. Before this exercise, I thought humans were weak. I thought your species survived through luck and technology. But you are something else entirely, are you not? We are survivors, Jake said simply. Just like everyone here. Just like you. The storm lasted through the night and into the next day. 20 hours of relentless fury that reshaped the landscape outside. When it finally passed, Jake carefully removed the barrier from the cave entrance and looked outside. The world had changed. Trees were flattened. The ground was covered in debris and pools of toxic rainwater. Steam rose from rocks that had been struck by lightning. It looked like the surface of an alien world, which it was. But the sky was clear, and the twin suns were shining. It is over, Jake announced. We made it. The cadets emerged from the cave slowly, their bodies stiff and cold from the long night in the water. They looked at the devastation around them with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Sheev approached Jake and did something unexpected. The small Pelori pressed his forehead against Jake's hand, a gesture that meant deep gratitude in his culture. You saved us, he said. Again. Jake smiled and gently patted Sheev's feathered head. We saved each other. Now let us find the extraction point and get off this rock. The group looked at him with expressions of tired hope. They were battered and exhausted, but they were alive. And with Jake leading them, they were starting to believe they might actually make it home. The landscape after the superstorm was almost unrecognizable. Jake stood at the cave entrance, studying the changed terrain with careful eyes. Rivers had formed where there had been dry ground. Hills had collapsed into new valleys. The path they had used to reach the caves no longer existed. The original extraction point is gone, Torvik said, checking his scanner. The device had survived the storm, sealed in a waterproof container. The coordinates now show open water. The entire area must have flooded. Jake nodded. He had expected something like this. What about the backup extraction point? Torvik worked the controls for a moment. 30 kilometers to the northeast. Through unknown territory. 30 kilometers. With an injured cadet who could not walk, limited supplies, and a landscape full of new dangers. Jake looked at the exhausted faces of his companions. They had survived so much already. Could they survive this final challenge? We can do this, he said, his voice carrying the calm confidence that had kept them alive for 5 days. 2 days of walking, maybe 3 if we take it slow. We have water and enough food if we ration carefully. We just need to stay together and keep moving. The group organized themselves without argument. Jake took the lead, as he always did now. Torvik carried Senix, whose leg was healing but still could not bear weight. Zira walked beside the Pelori cadets, helping them over difficult obstacles. Even Nyla, who had been the most frightened throughout the exercise, moved forward with determination. The first day of travel was exhausting. The storm had displaced wildlife throughout the region, and dangerous creatures were everywhere. Jake led the group around 3 different predator territories, adding hours to their journey but keeping everyone safe. They crossed a newly formed river using a fallen tree as a bridge. Jake tested it first, making sure it would hold their weight. He helped each cadet across, one at a time, while keeping watch for any threats in the water. That night, they camped in the hollow of a massive fallen tree. Jake set up a rotation of watches so everyone could get some sleep. He took the longest shift himself, sitting in the darkness and listening to the sounds of the unfamiliar wilderness. Zira found him during the quiet hours before dawn. You should rest more, she said, settling beside him. You carry so much weight for all of us. I sleep enough, Jake said, though they both knew it was not entirely true. Besides, we are almost there. I can rest when we are off this planet. Jake, Zira said, using his name for the first time. I have been thinking about something. When this is over, I want to learn more about humans. About how you survive, how you think, how you train. Would that be possible? Jake smiled in the darkness. I think that could be arranged. Earth has plenty of wilderness programs for training. Though I should warn you, our planet is considered a Class 12 Deathworld by galactic standards. Zero was quiet for a moment. 12? That is higher than Vexorus 7. Much higher. But do not worry. I would be there to guide you. The second day brought their final challenge. They were making good progress across a wide plain when the ground began to shake. At first, Jake thought it was an earthquake. Then he saw the source of the disturbance. A massive creature was emerging from the earth about 200 meters ahead. It was bigger than anything they had encountered so far. Its body was as long as 3 ground vehicles placed end to end, covered in armored plates and sharp spines. Its head was crowned with a ring of eyes, all of them now focused on the small group of cadets. Titan Crawler, Torvik breathed. I thought those were extinct. Apparently not, Jake said, his mind already racing through options. The creature was between them and the extraction point. Going around would take hours they did not have. Fighting was impossible. Running might work, but the injured Senex would slow them down. The Titan Crawler began moving toward them, its massive body crushing everything in its path. I will draw it away, Jake said, just as he had with the Shadow Moors. No, Torvik grabbed his arm. Not this time. You cannot face that thing alone. I will not allow it. Jake looked at the Gorvhan. Something had changed in Torvik over the past 5 days. The proud warrior who had dismissed humans as weak was gone. In his place was a friend who had learned the value of teamwork. Fine, Jake said. We do this together. Zira, take the others and find a path around. Torvik and I will keep that thing busy. Zira hesitated, but she knew better than to argue. She gathered the remaining cadets and began leading them away from the confrontation. Jake and Torvik faced the Titan Crawler together. The creature was moving faster now, sensing easy prey. What is the plan? Torvik asked. Make noise, keep its attention, lead it away from the others, and try not to die. Simple enough. They split up, approaching the creature from different angles. Jake shouted and waved his arms while Torvik threw rocks at the creature's armored hide. The Titan Crawler stopped, its ring of eyes moving between the 2 targets it chose to chase. Jake first. Jake ran toward a deep ravine he had spotted earlier. The ground was unstable here, damaged by the superstorm. He jumped across the ravine at its narrowest point and landed hard on the other side. The Titan Crawler tried to follow. Its massive weight was too much for the weakened ground. The edge of the ravine crumbled, and the creature's front half plunged downward. It let out a deafening roar of rage and confusion, but it was not finished. The creature's back legs found purchase, and it began pulling itself out. Torvik appeared beside Jake. That thing is not giving up. Then we need to be somewhere else. Jake spotted a steep slope leading down to a rocky channel. This way. Fast. They slid down the slope, using their hands and feet to control their descent. Rocks tumbled around them. Behind them, the Titan Crawler freed itself from the ravine and resumed its chase, but they had gained enough distance. By the time the creature reached the slope, Jake and Torvik had disappeared into the rocky terrain below. The Titan Crawler searched for a while, then gave up and retreated to its underground lair. Jake and Torvik found the others waiting at the edge of the extraction zone. 8 cadets, battered and exhausted, but alive. They adjusted. The extraction shuttle arrived an hour later. As it descended through the atmosphere, Instructor Velthus's voice came over the communication system. All cadets present and accounted for. Prepare for extraction. They boarded the shuttle in silence. No one had the energy to speak. Jake found a seat near a window and looked out at Vexorus 7 as they rose through the sky. Zira sat beside him. "You are smiling," she observed. "After everything we went through, you are smiling." "It was a good trip," Jake said. "Reminded me of a camping weekend I took in high school." The weather was worse, though. Much more mosquitoes. Zira stared at him. "This reminded you of a casual trip." Jake shrugged. "Alaska can be rough that time of year." At the orbital station, Instructor Velthos was waiting for them. The Crithian's compound eyes studied Jake with an intensity that bordered on intimidation. "Cadet Collins," Velthos said, "in the entire history of this exercise, no mixed species group has ever completed the survival examination on a Class 3 Deathworld without casualties. Your group is the first." Jake stood at attention. "We worked together, sir." Everyone contributed. "That is not what I observed." Velthos stepped closer. "I observed a human who treated a Class 3 Deathworld as if it were a recreational facility. I observed a being who faced predators without fear, who survived a superstorm by hiding in a cave with other predators, and who risked his life repeatedly for cadets he had never met before." Jake said nothing. "Tell me, Cadet, what kind of planet produces beings like you?" Jake smiled slightly. "Earth, sir. Class 12 Deathworld. The planet that never stops trying to kill us and never succeeds." Velthos was silent for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, already composing a formal request in his mind. The request would ask the Galactic Coalition to reclassify Earth's danger rating. It would suggest new protocols for training alongside human cadets. It would recommend that all coalition species learn about human survival techniques. And at the bottom of the request, Velthos would add a personal note. These beings evolved on a world that makes our death worlds look like vacation resorts. They are terrifying. And they are on our side. Thank the stars for that. Back on the observation deck, Jake stood looking out at the planet below. Torvik joined him, along with Zira, Chief, and the others. They stood together in comfortable silence, survivors bound by shared experience. "Jake," Torvik said finally, "when this is over, I would like to visit Earth. See this Class 12 Deathworld for myself." "Me too," Zira added. "And me," Chief said, his feathers fluffing with nervous excitement. Jake looked at his new friends and smiled. "Just wait until you see the mosquitoes." The group laughed. And somewhere in the galaxy, Earth continued its endless rotation, producing generation after generation of the most adaptable, stubborn, and strangely cheerful survivors the universe had ever seen. The galaxy was only just beginning to understand what that meant.